Hey everyone, it's Amy from Thinline 206. This week we're going to be talking about depression and how that relates to our corrections officers. So, in the corrections field, there's research and studies out there that show that PTSD is rampant among this population. So, we oftentimes, when we think about corrections work or prison systems, we think about the individuals that are in prison and are there because they committed a crime. But we don't think about the aspect that the people that are taking care of them are also, in a way, serving time in the aspect that they are experiencing trauma day in and day out. And there are statistics out there showing about 34% suffer from PTSD in the corrections world. And so suicide rates, therefore, are also super high amongst this population. And one research article that I had actually looked at said that suicide rates amongst corrections officers is actually twice as high as police officers in the general public. But they also found out that it's 39% higher than all other professions combined, which is huge. And so that means we're missing something big in the corrections field if our suicide rates are that high. And primarily it goes right back to the trauma and the PTSD. And, the fact that these individuals are working in these systems and in these walls, they're getting that isolation that the other inmates are also experiencing. But about probably only 5% of their job is traumatic and those traumatic events. But yet our numbers are showing these high percentages of depression, anxiety, PTSD, trauma, and suicide amongst our corrections officers. So there's something huge missing here. So I wanted to talk a little bit about depression and some of the signs and symptoms. And obviously the biggest red flag would be suicidal thoughts, plans, or intent of following through. So some of the symptoms that we some of the symptoms that we're going to talk about are ones that are often seen initially before the more severe, like suicidal thoughts, come in play. And so these can be maybe pinpointed by some of our support family members, friends, coworkers, to kind of help get us the help that we need when we're healthcare professionals that are in that standing. So just like our news has reported, the doctor in New York that committed suicide amongst all this stress, we're seeing this in various different fields. So this is an important topic for corrections, but it's also a very important topic for us to kind of apply to all of our first responders and healthcare providers. But the best part about it is because we're talking about depression in general, if you have a family member that is not in any of these fields, these apply too. So we're going to kind of go through 10 different things, signs, symptoms to kind of watch for and what that looks like. We're going to start with some of the more common ones because oftentimes those are the things that we hear about most. And then towards the end, I'm going to kind of go into some of the ones that we don't really think of as often. So the first one, loss of interest. So that's a very common one that we hear about. People who are experiencing depression, maybe not feeling like they want to engage in certain hobbies that they used to. Maybe they used to go hunting or fishing and they don't do that anymore. Maybe not because they just don't want to, but because they just lost that joy or pleasure in engaging in these activities or different social activities as well. The second one is helplessness and hopelessness and having those types of feelings that nothing's going to get better, that doesn't matter what you do, nothing is going to change how you're feeling. And so it's kind of that doom and gloom, like everything is bad, everything is negative, and there's nothing anybody can say or do, and there's nothing you can say or do to kind of help climb you out of that hole. And so that helplessness and hopelessness feeling. The third one I want to go over is loss of energy. So physically, you're feeling just completely drained, sluggish, and even maybe the smallest tasks like getting up and showering or getting dressed for the day, brushing your teeth. Some of those small tasks for someone that is experiencing some major depression can seem very impossible to complete. So you may notice some changes in, their appearance as well. Feelings of worthlessness is another one that we really hear a lot about. If someone's depressed, they're feeling worthless. They may have like this strong sense of shame, and just feeling very critical about yourself. So telling yourself all these negative things, and just feeling completely worthless. One of the ones that I actually have individuals tell me often that they don't think about being associated with depression is appetite and weight changes. So you may see a weight gain, or a weight loss. I've seen a lot more weight loss just because a lot of individuals that I've seen just are, which we'll talk about sleep changes next, but like sleeping all the time, not eating, but you can see both. So appetite and weight changes are one that is common and associated with depression as well. So sleep changes can be, insomnia or the oversleeping where you're sleeping all day. Oftentimes we hear more about the oversleeping, but it doesn't mean that the insomnia can't be there as well. Anger or irritability is our number 7 on the list. So feeling agitated, having some low frustration tolerance, being short-tempered, that can also go along with depression. Number 8. So this one is it's called reckless behavior, and oftentimes we think of like substance use, like that individual is using a lot or they're drinking a lot, and so it makes sense that they're probably depressed. But what we don't think about are some of the other reckless behaviors that come along with that as well, like gambling or reckless driving. Another one that I notice, and oftentimes in our military culture, is that kind of being more of an adrenaline junkie, like seeking some of those more reckless kind of behaviors. Another thing, number 9, would be concentration problems. So not being able to keep a focus, making different decisions, and that might be very difficult for an individual. And oftentimes, like forgetting things, like having a hard time remembering stuff, can also be a sign of depression. And lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about physical aches and pains. So this is one that we don't hear about as often as well. And that's like having more and more migraines, having more problems with like muscle pains, that isn't obviously associated with other things, stomach pains, things that relate to our physical ailments, physical complaints and ailments tend to increase when we're experiencing depression. And then going back to the beginning, obviously the suicidal ideation, thoughts and plans are one of our more severe symptoms. And so if you're experiencing those things, I just want to kind of recap what I had talked about last week, is that there is a national suicide prevention hotline number. And so please feel free to contact them. I will put the number on the end of this video. If you're struggling with anything, please reach out to a therapist in your area. Look for some support group meetings, and just talk to some of those people that are also in the field, because there's this huge sense of feeling of that we can't show weakness. We need to be tough. That mental health is there's huge stigma with that, especially in the corrections field. and showing weakness is not good in that field. It kind of opens you up to the potential to be vulnerable in a negative way, and so oftentimes we in the aspect of like being in the corrections field, we won't reach out for that help. And so I hope that this at least gave you an idea of some of the symptoms of depression and things to watch for. And if you are concerned about any of your family and friends, please also check out the number that I'm going to list at the end here for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful weekend.